Part 1. The Sword That Cuts Through Effort.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
There's a story from feudal Japan, whispered through the centuries, of a lone swordsman who never lost a duel. Not once. He fought over 60 battles, many to the death, and walked away untouched. His name was Miyamoto Musashi. But what's most shocking isn't his skill, it's his philosophy. Musashi didn't believe in trying harder. He believed in removing effort altogether. In a world obsessed with discipline, obsession, and relentless drive, Musashi's wisdom cuts like a sword through modern ambition. He taught us something radically counterintuitive: the more you try, the worse it gets. This idea seems absurd in our culture. We worship effort. We are told that if we fail, we simply didn't try hard enough. But Musashi's path was different. He believed that effort clouded the mind, that trying too hard introduced tension, fear, and hesitation, that mastery was not found through force but through flow. He wrote in his book of 5 Rings, the spirit must not be clouded with the concept of victory or defeat. The mind must be as still as the surface of a calm pond. You see, Musashi's brilliance wasn't physical. It was psychological. He understood something we are only now beginning to rediscover. Effort is the enemy of presence. Why is this so hard for us to accept? Because we've been conditioned to believe that success is a direct result of effort, that the universe rewards hustle. But there's a hidden cost to this belief. When you try too hard, you introduce resistance. You tighten your grip. You overthink. You disconnect. And when you disconnect, you lose access to the natural intelligence that guides instinct, intuition, and insight. Musashi trained not to become stronger, but to become emptier, less self-conscious, less attached, more attuned to the field of the present moment, which is where true action arises. This paradox that effort can obstruct excellence is not exclusive to martial arts. It appears in every domain. In Zen meditation, we are told, don't try to meditate. Just sit. In Taoism, Lao Tzu writes, when nothing is done, nothing is left undone. Even philosopher Alan Watts echoed this when he said, muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. The deepest wisdom traditions all point to the same truth. Trying is often the very thing that blocks becoming. The more we grasp, the more we push reality away. The more we chase, the further the goal runs. Here's the psychological mechanism behind this. When we try, we split our mind. One part does the action, while the other watches, judges, and evaluates. We become two minds, and in that split, presence disappears. Flow vanishes. Self-consciousness takes over. The sword becomes heavy. The words stumble. The hands shake. Have you ever noticed how your best ideas come when you're not trying to think? Or how your body moves effortlessly when you're not focused on its movement? That's not coincidence. That's the absence of effort. That's what Musashi mastered. Let's go deeper. What happens when we stop trying? Most people fear they'll collapse into laziness, that they'll lose purpose or drift without direction. But Musashi's philosophy wasn't about apathy, it was about alignment. He trained obsessively, yes, but not to force outcomes. He trained to erase the self that tries, to become one with the action itself. In combat, this meant becoming the strike, not the striker. In life, this means becoming the moment, not the one acting in it. Can you imagine moving through life like that? Without self-consciousness, without overthinking? Just pure, fluid, embodied action? The philosopher Martin Heidegger spoke of this state as being in the world, a mode of existence where you are no longer separate from your experience, where the hammer is not an object, but an extension of your being, where the sword is not held, it moves through you. Musashi lived in this state. He didn't think, I must defeat my opponent. He simply responded. And this responsiveness was faster than thought, more precise than strategy. It was non-dual, and that's what made him untouchable. Now let's look at the modern condition. We are obsessed with doing things right. We plan, rehearse, optimize, and analyze. We try to control every detail. But Musashi would say, the more you try to control, the more you lose control. Because control is rooted in fear, and fear creates tension, and tension breaks the flow. This is why so many people fail, not from lack of talent, but from over-effort. They are too tight, too anxious, too attached to the outcome, and the more they try, the worse it gets. This is true in conversation, in creativity, in leadership. The best public speakers don't try to be charismatic. They are present. The best artists don't try to be original. They stop trying, and originality flows through them. The best leaders don't force decisions. They sense what needs to be done and move decisively. This is not magic. This is non-resistance. And it's trainable. So how do we access this state in our own lives? First, we must understand that trying is a symptom of mistrust. We don't trust the moment. We don't trust ourselves. We don't trust the process. So we cling, or we force. We push. But Musashi's path begins with the opposite, surrender, not to weakness but to reality, to the unfolding intelligence of the now. When you surrender trying, you don't become passive. You become precise. You become responsive rather than reactive. You start acting from intuition, not interference. This is where practice comes in, but not practice in the way we've been taught. Musashi didn't practice to accumulate techniques. He practiced to dissolve barriers, to strip away everything that wasn't truth. Every movement, every breath, every moment of stillness was a sharpening of awareness, a return to center. His training was not about doing more. It was about doing less with more depth. And this is where psychology meets philosophy. Depth beats effort every time. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Trying too hard is often our unconscious trying to override the present. But the present is already intelligent, already whole. Our job is to align with it, not overpower it. When we do, something extraordinary happens. We enter flow. And in flow, time disappears, doubt dissolves, and effort gives way to pure embodiment. This isn't just theory. Neuroscience confirms it. In flow states, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for self-monitoring and overthinking, shuts down. You lose your sense of self, but you gain access to deeper intelligence. This is precisely what Musashi experienced. In the heat of battle, There was no me. There was only movement, only response, only presence. And that's why he won. So now, ask yourself, where in your life are you trying too hard? Where are you forcing, grasping, or controlling? What would happen if you stopped trying and started trusting? If you replaced effort with awareness? If you replaced force with flow? These are not easy questions. They challenge the very foundation of how we've been taught to live. But they open the door to something timeless, something unshakable, something Musashi. Because the truth is, the more you try, the worse it gets, not because trying is bad, but because trying comes from separation, from the illusion that you are separate from life, from the moment, from the action. But you are not. You never were. And the moment you realize that, the sword becomes light, the path becomes clear, and the effort disappears. Part 2. The Way of No Way. There is a line in Musashi's Dakodo, his 21-point philosophy written just days before his death, that reads, "Do not seek pleasure for its own sake." At first glance, it seems simple, but beneath it lies a world of meaning. Musashi was not just warning against hedonism. He was pointing toward a deeper truth, that our seeking is the very thing that causes suffering. We seek pleasure, success, meaning, enlightenment, even peace, but the more we seek, the more elusive those things become. Why? Because seeking implies lack, and lack distorts perception. We try, we grasp, we chase, and the very act of trying reinforces that we don't yet have. Musashi understood this at a level that few ever do. He realized that true mastery, the kind that transcends techniques, styles, or even goals, comes only when we cease to fixate on outcomes. In other words, when we walk the way of no way. This is not passivity, it's presence. It's the ability to act without attachment, to show up fully, but without needing the moment to bend to your will. This is the essence of Zen, of Stoicism, of Taoism. And it's the essence of Musashi's path, the path of the undefeated warrior who fought with no fear, because he fought with no expectation. We can see this philosophy echoed in the words of Epictetus: "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." Musashi embodied this freedom. He did not try to control the fight. He entered it. He became one with it. And because he did not fear loss, he could not be defeated. The more we try to control life, the more rigid we become, and rigidity breaks under pressure. But flexibility, mental, physical, emotional, is the mark of the master. It bends, it flows, it adapts. Let's reflect on this. Where in your life are you clinging to control? Your career? Your relationships? Your image? Your outcomes? And what would happen if you loosened your grip, not out of apathy, but out of trust? Musashi's philosophy is not about giving up. It's about letting go. There is a difference. Giving up comes from weakness. Letting go comes from wisdom. Wisdom that says, "I will give everything I have, but I will not try to force what cannot be forced." We are taught to fear surrender. We associate it with defeat. But in Musashi's world, surrender is power. It is the surrender of ego, of attachment, of the identity that must win. And when the ego dissolves, something remarkable happens. Pure action emerges. action unclouded by fear, uncontaminated by pride, unburdened by the outcome. This is what Zen calls mushin, or no mind, the state of spontaneous, unself-conscious action. It is the sword that moves without thought, the brushstroke that flows without hesitation, the decision that rises from silence, not stress. Psychologically, this is what modern therapists call radical acceptance. The idea that peace is not found by changing the world, but by changing our relationship to it. Musashi didn't fight reality. He worked with it. He studied the terrain, the wind, the opponent's rhythm, not to dominate, but to merge. And this merging allowed him to move with a kind of elegance that effort could never produce. It's the same principle that allows a surfer to ride a wave not by overpowering it, but by synchronizing with it. Now, let's get practical. How do we apply this in a world that demands results, performance, and metrics? First, we must shift our orientation from doing to being, from proving to expressing, from forcing to allowing. Ask yourself, what would it look like to act purely from alignment instead of anxiety? What if your next move wasn't about achieving a result, but about honoring your inner rhythm? What if you stopped trying to be inspired and simply listened to what's already moving inside you? Musashi's genius wasn't that he knew more, it's that he needed less. He stripped away everything that wasn't essential. He didn't wear armor. He didn't follow a school. He didn't rely on tradition. He relied on awareness. This is the true mark of the master: simplicity. The ability to meet life directly, without ornament, without overthinking, without trying to be something. Just being, fully, clearly, without distortion. Consider this: when children play, they don't try to be joyful. They are joyful. They don't try to be creative. They are creative. But as we grow, we become self-aware in the wrong way. We begin to monitor. We begin to compare. We begin to judge. And in that judgment, effort creeps in. We try to be what we once simply were. And the more we try, the further we drift. Musashi's path is a return to that original state, not childishness, but childlike presence. This is why his duels were so effortless. Because he didn't carry the weight of self. He didn't enter the fight thinking, I must win. He entered thinking, I must be fully here. And that presence, unpolluted by fear or pride or strategy, was more powerful than any technique. It's the same presence we feel in great athletes, dancers, poets. They move not to impress, but to express. And that expression is so pure, it becomes transcendent. Let's not romanticize this. Musashi's life was brutal. He was orphaned. He killed. He wandered. He suffered. But through that suffering, he carved a path of clarity. And his clarity teaches us that the path to mastery is not paved with more effort, but with less interference. We do not need to add. We need to subtract, strip away the noise, the shoulds, the image, the fear. And what remains is something timeless, something unshakable. So the next time you feel yourself trying to be better, trying to be seen, trying to make it work, pause. Ask yourself, what if I didn't try? What if I simply allowed what wants to emerge? What if I moved from stillness instead of striving? These questions are not easy. They threaten the very foundation of our conditioning. but they also reveal the doorway to freedom. Because the truth is, effort is not the key to greatness. It's the residue of misalignment. And when we drop the need to prove, to push, to control, we find something deeper. Something Musashi lived, breathed, and died by, the way of no way. The sword that cuts through effort, the presence that needs no polish, the action that arises from silence. This is the paradox of the path. The harder you try, the worse it gets. But the moment you stop trying, not from defeat, but from trust, you begin to move with a power that no one can touch. Part 3. The warrior's quiet mind. There is a moment in the life of every seeker, whether warrior, philosopher, artist, or simply a human being in crisis, where they must confront the truth that effort alone will not save them. It may bring them to the edge of transformation. But to step through the threshold, they must release something far more difficult than laziness or distraction. They must release their need to control. And this is where most turn back. Miyamoto Musashi did not turn back. He stepped through, and on the other side he found a state of mind that few ever reach, the quiet mind of the true warrior. Musashi's quiet mind was not passive. It was ready, still yet alert, empty yet aware. He wrote, "In the void is virtue, and no evil. Wisdom has existence, principle has existence, the way has existence, spirit is nothingness." This is not poetic mysticism. It is psychological clarity. Musashi had discovered what many Eastern philosophies and modern psychologists agree upon, that the mind, when uncluttered by attachment, becomes a vessel for spontaneous, intelligent action. It is not frozen by fear, nor seduced by desire. It simply responds to what is. This is what Zen calls no mind, mushin, and what the psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi described as flow. But Musashi arrived at this insight centuries before neuroscience would confirm it. He knew that the mind that tries too hard is a mind that cannot see. It cannot adapt. It cannot sense the subtle shifts in the opponent, the wind, the timing. Trying inserts the ego between perception and response. And in combat, that gap is fatal. In life, it's just as dangerous. It leads to anxiety, overthinking, paralysis, burnout. Consider this. How often do we overthink simple decisions? How often do we rehearse conversations that haven't happened, plan for outcomes we can't control, or obsess about how we're perceived? This constant mental noise is the modern battle. And it is just as deadly to our peace as Musashi's sword was to his opponents. The cure is not more analysis. It is less interference. It is the cultivation of spontaneity through stillness, or reactivity, but responsiveness. Not effort, but attunement. Musashi teaches us that the true warrior does not wait for perfect conditions. He does not rely on technique alone. He trains the mind to be always ready, yet never rigid. This paradox is the essence of psychological resilience. To be flexible without being weak. To be firm without being tense. The philosopher Bruce Lee, who was profoundly influenced by Musashi, echoed this when he said, "Be like water. Water adapts. It yields, but it also carves through rock. Its power lies not in effort, but in fluidity." Let's bring this home. In our lives, we are constantly engaged in inner battles. Not with swords, but with doubt, with fear, with expectation, with the pressure to succeed, to be someone, to prove something. But what if the path forward isn't to try harder, but to see more clearly? What if the real work isn't in the doing, but in the undoing? Undoing the tension, undoing the story, undoing the identity that says, I must try harder to be worthy. What if worthiness was never earned but remembered? This is where Musashi's path becomes deeply psychological. He wasn't just a swordsman. He was a man who stripped himself of illusions. He wandered without home. He practiced without affiliation. He lived without comfort. Not because he enjoyed suffering, but because he knew every attachment is a weight on the mind. And a heavy mind cannot move freely. A heavy mind cannot see clearly. And a heavy mind, no matter how trained, will break under pressure. So how do we lighten the mind in our world, one filled with information, stimulation, and expectation? We begin with awareness. Not the kind that analyzes every thought, but the kind that watches without judgment. We notice when we're trying, when we're forcing, when we're subtly grasping for control. And instead of pushing harder, we pause, we breathe, we return to the moment. This is not laziness, this is precision. And over time, this practice creates a mind that is sharp, yet soft, still, yet spontaneous, present, yet powerful. The Stoics knew this too. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." Modern psychology confirms this. The most effective leaders, athletes, and creators are not the ones who try the hardest. They are the ones who can enter states of deep flow on command, who can release effort and move from alignment. This is not talent, it is trainable. And the training begins with non-resistance. Non-resistance doesn't mean avoiding difficulty. It means not creating additional struggle on top of what is already there. Musashi didn't avoid conflict. He stepped into it with clarity. He didn't fear death. He faced it, and in doing so, moved beyond it. He didn't cling to form. He adapted to the moment. And perhaps most importantly, he didn't try to be a great swordsman. He simply became one not through striving, but through removing everything that wasn't aligned with the way. This brings us to the final and perhaps most profound insight. You don't become free by trying to be free. You become free by realizing you were never bound. The bondage was in the belief, in the grasping, in the trying. The moment you stop trying to be something, you begin to become what you always were. And what you are is not a product of effort, but of essence. So ask yourself now, in the quiet of your own being, where have you mistaken effort for evolution? Where have you confused striving with strength? Who would you be without the need to try so hard? What would emerge from you if you stopped pushing and started trusting the intelligence of your own presence? These are the questions Musashi didn't write in his scrolls, but lived through his life. His sword was not just a weapon, it was a mirror. And when he held it, he wasn't fighting others. He was cutting through illusion, through ego, through the self that tries. And in that cutting, he found peace. Not a peace free from battle, but a peace that remained unharmed by the battle. This is the final paradox. The more you try, the worse it gets. But the moment you stop trying, not from defeat, but from mastery, you become unstoppable. not because you overpower life, but because you move with it, in step, in rhythm, in harmony. Like Musashi, like the wind, like the sword that moves through silence,